September 8, 1915. East London factory district burns under Zeppelin L13. Albert Webb carries William Hartley through rubble and debris. Hartley's legs shattered, blood soaking through his coat, factory exploding behind them in a shower of brick and flame. Webb is a floor foreman, 3 pounds a week, work cap covered in ash. Hartley owns Hartley Munitions Steel, £2 million empire, contracts with the War Office. 90 seconds after Webb drags him clear, the entire building collapses. Hartley, coughing blood, grabs Webb's collar. "You'll never work another day." Webb thinks he's being fired. Next morning, a handwritten note arrives at Webb's tenement. "Come to my estate Sunday, alone, tell no one." 3 days later, Albert Webb vanishes from East London records. No death certificate, no forwarding address, just a handwritten promise on factory letterhead. What did that note say? And how does a factory worker carrying a dying man through the ruins become a millionaire without anyone knowing? By late evening on September 8, 1915, the East End factory district burned in 3 separate locations. Zeppelin L13, part of Germany's strategic bombing campaign, had dropped incendiary bombs across industrial London. William Hartley owned Hartley Munitions Steel, one of dozens of private manufacturers supplying the War Office with artillery components, shell casings, and steel fittings. His contracts were worth over £2 million, his reputation built on precision and punctuality. Albert Webb had worked the factory floor for 12 years. 28 years old, married, 2 children living in a poplar tenement. He earned £3 a week as floor foreman, enough to keep his family fed but not comfortable. When the air raid sirens screamed, workers evacuated to the street. Hartley stayed behind to secure blueprints from his office, government contracts, proprietary designs, documents that couldn't be replaced. Webb heard screaming through the locked door. He kicked it 3 times before the frame splintered. Inside, Hartley lay pinned under an iron support beam, legs trapped, blood pooling beneath him. Fire spread along the back wall, ammunition crates stacked 10 feet away. Webb grabbed the beam with both hands. 3 witnesses, James Collier, Edward Finch, and Samuel Cross, all listed in factory logs, later swore Webb lifted that 400-pound beam alone. No leverage, just raw panic and adrenaline. He dragged Hartley through smoke thick enough to choke them both. They stumbled into the street 90 seconds before the factory exploded, flames reaching 30 feet into the night sky. Hartley, coughing blood, grabbed Webb's collar with one shaking hand. "You'll never work another day." Webb thought he was being fired for property damage. What did Hartley see in that moment that made him write a promise worth more than Webb could imagine? The note arrived before dawn on September 9th, delivered by private courier to Webb's tenement. Handwritten on plain paper, no signature. "Come to my estate Sunday, alone, tell no one." Webb's wife, Margaret, asked who sent it. Webb said he didn't know, but he knew. Sunday morning, September 12th, Webb walked to Kensington, a neighborhood he'd never entered before. Hartley's estate sat behind iron gates, 3 stories of brick and white trim, gardens that stretched wider than Webb's entire street. A butler led him inside without asking his name. The study smelled like leather and cigar smoke. Hartley sat at a mahogany desk, hands still bandaged, writing something slowly. No servants remained in the room. Hartley slid a sheet of paper across the desk. Factory letterhead, Hartley Munitions Steel printed at the top. "Read it, then burn it or keep it." Webb read. His face went white. "This can't be real." Hartley's voice stayed calm. "It's real if you do exactly what I say. No one can know. Not your wife. Not ever." The terms were written in Hartley's own hand. 50% partnership in a shadow enterprise, immediate capital of £500, new identity, relocation to Mayfair, training in factory operations and finance. Conditions: Webb would change his name, leave East London, never speak of the rescue again, never reveal the partnership publicly. At the bottom, Hartley had signed. Webb pressed his thumbprint into the ink beside Hartley's signature. Physical proof, not just words. He folded the promise into his coat pocket. When he left that estate, he walked differently, shoulders straighter, eyes forward, like he'd swallowed something that couldn't be coughed back up. Hartley Munitions Steel was verified in 1915 War Office supply contracts, one of 43 private manufacturers serving the British military. Webb left with £500 in cash, new identity papers listing him as Arthur Welland, and a promise that would erase Albert Webb from history. Between September and December 1915, Albert Webb vanished. His wife was told he'd been reassigned to special war work. Couldn't say where, couldn't say when he'd return. Factory payroll records show Albert Webb removed from the roster on September 15th. No forwarding address, no termination notice. In his place appeared Arthur Welland, investor, listed at a residential hotel in Mayfair. Webb's old work cap and boots sat boxed in his hotel room, relics of a life he wasn't supposed to remember. Hartley's instructions were specific. Learn to move like money, watch how power talks, never flinch when someone questions your background. Webb, now Welland, attended meetings with Hartley, sat in the corner, said nothing. Observers thought he was a clerk or an accountant, someone hired to take notes. He wasn't being paid to disappear, he was being taught to run an empire. Hartley showed him how contracts worked, how bids were structured, how factory operations converted raw materials into profit margins. The promise is the foundation, Hartley told him once. Everything else is theater. By December, Welland had memorized factory logistics, supply chains, and wartime procurement protocols. His signature changed, smoother, more confident, less like a foreman and more like a man who signed contracts worth thousands. His speech changed too. The East End accent faded. He started using words like capital and equity without hesitation. Hartley wasn't building a partner. He was building insurance, someone who could operate independently, someone who owed him everything, someone who would never betray him because betrayal meant losing the only life that mattered. Webb's old cap stayed in that hotel room, hidden in a drawer. The man who wore it was gone. What was Hartley really building? A partner or a puppet? By 1916, Arthur Welland owned his first factory. Located in Birmingham, it manufactured munitions components, shell casings, trigger assemblies, steel fittings. Officially, Welland was listed as sole proprietor. Unofficially, Hartley provided the capital, the contracts, and the connections. Webb sat in on Hartley's meetings, never introduced, never acknowledged. He learned how bids were structured, how shipments were tracked, how payments moved between accounts. Hartley taught him coded language that sounded like business but functioned like conspiracy. The promise is the foundation, meant the partnership stayed hidden. Everything else is theater, meant public perception didn't matter, only results. UK munitions production tripled between 1916 and 1918, driven by wartime demand and government contracts. Welland's Birmingham factory thrived. By 1917, he controlled 2 more facilities, one in Manchester, one in Leeds. Each factory listed Arthur Welland as owner. Each factory supplied Hartley Munitions Steel with components at rates slightly below market value. The financial structure was brilliant. Welland owned the assets, Hartley controlled the strategy, both profited. Factory registration documents show Welland's signature evolving. Early papers show hesitant strokes, later documents show smooth confidence. Webb wasn't just learning business, he was becoming Hartley's insurance policy. But insurance against what? Hartley never said. The war dragged on, contracts multiplied, Welland's wealth grew in silence, never celebrated, never questioned. In public, he was an unknown investor. In private, he was Hartley's shadow, mirroring every move, absorbing every lesson, becoming the kind of man who could survive without being seen. One night in late 1917, Hartley told him, "You're not Albert Webb anymore. You understand that, right? You can never be him again." Webb, now Welland, nodded. The promise sat folded in his desk drawer, edges already yellowing. He never showed it to anyone. And why does a man need a ghost partner unless he's preparing for something no one else can see coming? November 1918. The armistice. Munitions contracts expired overnight. Thousands of factory workers found themselves unemployed, their wartime skills suddenly worthless. Hartley pivoted immediately. Steel production shifted to construction materials, peacetime manufacturing, automotive components. Arthur Welland followed the same path. By early 1919, Welland controlled 3 factories, all listed as independent operations. The financial press began noticing him. Arthur Welland, rising industrialist, unknown background, significant capital investments. Rivals started asking questions. Who is Welland? Where did his money come from? Why do his factories always seem to complement Hartley's operations without competing directly? Webb, living full-time as Welland now, moved between London and Birmingham, dressed in tailored suits, attended investor meetings, spoke with the confidence of someone who belonged. His transformation was complete. Posture, speech, mannerisms, no trace of the factory floor remained. A newspaper clipping from March 1919 shows Welland's first public photograph. Clean-shaven, expensive coat, standing outside his Manchester facility. Webb's brother saw that photo in a London paper. He didn't recognize the man in the picture. Different clothes, different posture, different face. That same year, Webb's wife was told her husband had died in a factory accident in 1916. Official notice, condolence payment, burial record filed in East London. She remarried in 1920, never knowing Webb was alive, wealthy, and living under another name. The promise kept Webb rich, but it erased Albert Webb completely. Every gain came with a cost. Webb owned factories, properties, investments, but he couldn't visit his children, couldn't acknowledge his past, couldn't even admit his real name. By late 1919, financial analysts noticed patterns. Welland's factories always bid just under Hartley's competitors, creating a pricing advantage without obvious collusion. Some suspected coordination. None could prove it. The promise was the foundation. Everything else was theater. But theater only works when the audience believes the performance. And people were starting to look closer. Between 1919 and 1925, Hartley and Welland coordinated expansion without ever being publicly linked. Welland's factories supplied Hartley's operations with raw materials and components. Contracts were structured to hide the connection. Different shipping routes, separate billing addresses, payments routed through intermediary accounts. Financial structure. Welland owned the assets. Hartley controlled the strategy. Both profited. Webb became genuinely skilled. Factory management, financial planning, contract negotiation. He wasn't pretending anymore. He'd become Arthur Welland in every way that mattered. Then Thomas Keene entered the picture. Keene was a financial journalist for the London Gazette, known for investigative pieces on industrial cartels and hidden partnerships. He started tracking shipments in early 1925, noticed something strange. Welland's factories consistently supplied materials to Hartley's competitors at rates slightly higher than what they charged Hartley's operations. The pattern was subtle, but consistent. Keene's notebook filled with arrows connecting Hartley and Welland businesses, shipping manifests, contract dates, price comparisons. He couldn't prove collusion, but he could prove coordination. In November 1925, Keene requested an interview with Arthur Welland. Webb agreed. Mistake. They met at a London hotel, neutral ground, off the record. Keene asked polite questions at first: background, business philosophy, future plans. Then he asked the question that changed everything. Have you always been Arthur Welland? Webb's face stayed calm, but his hands tightened on the armrests. What do you mean? Keene smiled. Your factories didn't exist before 1916. Your name doesn't appear in any records before 1915. You have no family, no history, no past. So I'll ask again. Have you always been Arthur Welland? Webb ended the interview, walked out, went straight to Hartley's estate. He knows. What do we do? Hartley's response was immediate. We do nothing. The promise holds. Within a week, Hartley met with Keane personally, offered him an exclusive interview on British war production secrets. Documents, insider access, front-page material. Keane took it. The Welland investigation disappeared. London Gazette archives show Keane published a Hartley profile in January 1926. No mention of Welland, no questions about hidden partnerships. December 1925. Keane's original draft exposé sat locked in Hartley's safe, never published, never destroyed. 3 pages detailing Arthur Welland's sudden appearance in 1915, the suspicious coordination between Welland's factories and Hartley's operations, the absence of any records confirming Welland's identity before the war. Keane had been close enough to ask the right question. Hartley hadn't threatened him, hadn't paid him off, just gave him a better story, something more immediate and newsworthy than speculation about a hidden partnership. It worked because it was smarter than force. Hartley didn't stop investigations by blocking them. He redirected them. That was the lesson Webb learned. Power isn't about control, it's about options. By 1926, the crisis had passed, but the warning remained clear. The promise was only as safe as the secrecy around it. One journalist with the right instincts had nearly exposed everything. What happens when the next one comes asking questions? Webb kept the promise folded in his desk drawer, edges fraying now, ink fading but still readable. He never showed it to anyone, never discussed it with Hartley except in emergencies. The paper itself had become symbolic, proof that the partnership was real, proof that Albert Webb had once existed, proof that a factory worker's thumbprint sat beside a millionaire's signature. But here's what no one understood yet. The promise wasn't just about money. It was about transformation. Hartley hadn't saved Webb's life by giving him wealth. He'd erased Webb's life by giving him a new one. The real question wasn't what the promise said. The real question was what it cost to keep it. Every year Webb lived as Welland, Albert Webb became more distant. Memories fading, connections severed, identity dissolving. His children were growing up without him. His wife had remarried. His brother didn't recognize his photograph. The promise held for 10 years. But the man who signed it was starting to wonder if he'd made a deal or signed a sentence. But what did the promise actually say? That answer was coming, just not yet. Between 1926 and 1932, Arthur Welland became genuinely wealthy, beyond Hartley's seed money, beyond the initial factories, beyond the shadow partnership. He owned 4 factories by 1930, residential properties in London and Birmingham, investments in the automotive manufacturing boom that transformed British industry. The UK automotive industry exploded between 1926 and 1930, production doubling as cars shifted from luxury items to consumer goods. Welland's timing was perfect. He supplied steel components to Austin, Morris, and Vauxhall, household names building vehicles for the middle class. Financial analysts stopped questioning his background. Success erased doubt. The wealthier Welland became, the less anyone cared where he came from. By 1932, he lived between London and Birmingham, maintaining 2 residences, traveling by private car, attending industry conferences, speaking at investment dinners. His transformation was total. Posture, speech, confidence, no trace of the factory floor, no hint of Albert Webb. The promise still sat in his desk drawer, folded and yellowed, edges fraying but still readable. He looked at it sometimes late at night, alone in his London study, wondering if the man who signed it still existed. Did Webb stay loyal out of gratitude or fear? The honest answer, both. Gratitude because Hartley had given him a life he couldn't have imagined. Fear because losing it meant losing everything, not just wealth, but identity. Going back wasn't an option. Albert Webb was dead. His wife had remarried. His children didn't know him. His name existed only in old factory records no one checked anymore. Welland was all that remained. In early 1932, Hartley called him. We should talk. In person. They met at Hartley's Kensington estate. the same study where the promise had been signed 17 years earlier. Hartley looked older, graying hair, slower movements, something in his posture that suggested time running out. "I'm not well," he said. "Heart. Doctors give me a year, maybe less." Webb stayed quiet. Hartley continued, "I need to see the promise one more time." Webb brought it the following week, unfolded it carefully on Hartley's desk. Early 1933. Hartley sat in his study, holding the promise, reading the terms he'd written 18 years earlier. 50% partnership, eternal silence, no exceptions. He laughed, not bitter, just amused. "I thought you'd burn it after the first year." Webb's response was honest. "It's the only proof I existed before." Hartley folded the paper carefully, handed it back. "I'm updating my will. The family doesn't know about you. They're going to be shocked." He explained the structure. Estate valued at roughly £1.6 million, split evenly between family and the A.W. Trust, Arthur Welland's legal entity, half to his wife and children, half to the man who saved his life and kept his word for 18 years. "They'll ask questions," Hartley said. "You'll need to decide how much to tell them." Webb nodded. "Why did you make me promise silence?" Hartley's answer was simple. "Not to protect me, to protect you. If people knew you were Albert Webb, they'd never accept you as Arthur Welland. Your success would always be questioned, always explained away as charity or obligation. I didn't give you money. I gave you a chance to become someone new. But that only works if no one knows who you were." It was the first time Hartley had explained his motive fully. The promise wasn't a reward, it was a test. Could Webb become Welland completely? Could he leave his past behind and build something real? The answer was yes, but the cost was higher than either of them had anticipated. Webb left that meeting knowing Hartley wouldn't live much longer. The promise would soon be irrelevant, the secret would emerge, and Albert Webb would have to decide whether to stay hidden or acknowledge the man he used to be. Hartley died on April 15, 1933. 200 mourners attended his funeral at St. Paul's Church in Kensington. Front page obituary. Beloved industrialist, philanthropist, survived by wife and 3 children. One man stood at the back of the church, older, expensive suit, refusing to give his name. Arthur Welland. He walked to the casket, placed the folded promise inside. The vicar tried to stop him. Welland said quietly, "He kept his word. So did I." He left before the family could question him, drove away in his Rolls-Royce, disappeared into London traffic. That afternoon, the solicitor read Hartley's will to the family. Halfway through, he paused at a clause that shocked everyone present. "To the A.W. Trust, managed by Arthur Welland, I leave 50% of my estate in recognition of service, loyalty, and partnership maintained from 1915 to present." Hartley's wife didn't recognize the name. His children had never heard of Arthur Welland. The solicitor provided a brief explanation. "Mr. Welland was a business partner of your husband's for nearly 18 years. The partnership was structured privately, but it's legally documented. Estate valuation, £1.6 million. Half to the family, half to Welland." The family hired investigators immediately. Within 2 weeks, they had answers. Arthur Welland was Albert Webb, factory foreman, listed as dead in 1916, real identity hidden for 17 years. Webb owned 4 factories, £800,000 in personal holdings, and had been Hartley's shadow partner since the Zeppelin raid in 1915. The investigators found Keene's original draft exposé in Hartley's safe, the one that had nearly revealed everything in 1925. They found factory registration documents showing Webb's signature evolution from hesitant to confident. They found the original rescue records, 3 witnesses, Collier, Finch, and Cross, who testified that Webb had saved Hartley's life. Hartley's final letter, read by the solicitor, explained everything. "Welland saved my life. I gave him a new one. The terms were fair. The partnership was real. Honor this." The Times of London published Hartley's obituary on April 17, 1933, mentioning business partner A. Welland, without elaboration. Public records confirmed the estate division. But here's what no one understood. The promise wasn't a reward. It was a test. Hartley wanted to see if Webb could become someone else entirely, and Webb had succeeded. The cost? Albert Webb no longer existed except as a name in old factory logs and a grave marker in East London. May 1933. The Hartley family decided not to fight the will. The investigators' report confirmed everything: Webb's rescue, the secret partnership, the 18 years of coordinated success. They met with Welland in London, asked him to explain. Webb showed them the promise, the original handwritten document, Hartley's signature, his own thumbprint, the terms written clearly: 50% partnership, eternal silence, no exceptions. Hartley's eldest son asked the obvious question: "Why did you stay silent? Why not tell anyone?" Webb's answer was honest. "Because your father understood something I didn't at first. If people knew I was a factory worker who got lucky, they'd never respect what I built. The silence wasn't about hiding, it was about becoming. He didn't give me charity. He gave me a chance to prove I could succeed on my own terms." The family understood. They didn't celebrate the arrangement, but they honored it. Scandal would have been easy. Factory worker fakes death, hides fortune, secret partnership exposed after millionaire's death. But the story was more complicated than that. Webb had earned his wealth. He'd learned factory management, financial strategy, contract negotiation. He'd built legitimate businesses, created jobs, supplied materials to major manufacturers. The fact that his start came from Hartley didn't invalidate what came after. By June 1933, the estate was settled. The family received their share. Welland received his. No lawsuits, no public scandal, no bitter disputes, just quiet acceptance that loyalty has value, and sometimes that value is worth £800,000. Webb returned to his London study, sat alone, looked at the promise one last time before placing it in his safe. He'd kept it for 18 years. Now it was just paper, proof of something that no longer mattered. The partnership was over. Hartley was gone. Albert Webb was officially dead. Only Arthur Welland remained. But here's the truth Webb finally understood. Some fortunes come from luck. Some come from talent. His came from silence. The willingness to erase everything he was for the chance to become something new. That's not a success story. That's a sentence. Webb gained £800,000, but he lost Albert Webb forever. His original children, 2, now adults, never knew their father lived as Arthur Welland. His wife, Margaret, died in 1928, still believing her husband had died in a factory accident during the war. She remarried in 1920, moved to Brighton, raised her children alone. Webb attended her funeral in 1928, stood at the back of the church wearing an expensive coat, never approached the family, never identified himself. His children didn't recognize him. Why would they? They'd been told their father was dead. The man in the expensive coat was a stranger. In 1933, after Hartley's will was read, and investigators traced Arthur Welland back to Albert Webb, his children learned the truth. Their father hadn't died in 1916. He'd faked his death, changed his name, and lived as a millionaire while they grew up poor. They wanted to meet him. Webb refused, not out of cruelty, out of protection. What was he supposed to say? "I'm your father, but I chose wealth over knowing you." The truth was more complicated. He'd chosen survival, transformation, and a promise that demanded total erasure. But explanations don't heal abandonment. In late 1933, Webb visited his own grave marker in East London. Albert Webb died, 1916. He stood there alone, reading the inscription, thinking about the cost of becoming someone else. Thousands of men vanished during the war. Records were incomplete. Families never knew what happened. Bodies were never recovered. Albert Webb was just one more name on that list. Except he hadn't died. he just stopped existing. Historical weight. The war erased identities casually, made disappearance normal, turned absence into fact. Webb used that chaos to escape, but he couldn't escape the realization that success built on erasure never feels complete. The promise made him rich. It gave him factories, properties, investments, respect, but it erased his past completely. No reunion, no acknowledgement, no return. You can change your name, but you can't change who you were, and you can't explain to your children why you chose to become someone else. By the 1940s, Webb, still living as Welland, was in his 60s. World War II had started, and his factories were converted back to wartime production. Steel components, munitions parts, the same cycle that had made him wealthy the first time. But this time, he wasn't hiding. Arthur Welland was a recognized industrialist, his success documented and respected. He made his own will in 1945. Fortune split between two groups, Hartley's family and Webb's biological children. Final gesture ensuring both identities were honored, both debts paid. He contacted his children, now in their 30s, explained everything, offered them their share. They accepted the money but kept their distance. Forgiveness wasn't simple. Understanding didn't erase the years of absence. Webb died in 1947 at age 60. His obituary listed him as Arthur Welland, industrialist, formerly Albert Webb, known for wartime manufacturing contributions and partnership with the late William Hartley. The original promise was donated to the Imperial War Museum in 1948, displayed as a World War I loyalty artifact, proof that rescue, gratitude, and transformation could be documented in handwritten terms. Visitors read the conditions: 50% partnership, eternal silence, no exceptions. They see Hartley's signature, Webb's thumbprint, the factory letterhead worn at the edges. The museum label reads, "Promise made after Zeppelin raid rescue, 1915. Partnership lasted 18 years. Terms honored by both parties." Younger generations ask the obvious question: would you sign it? Would you erase your identity for wealth? Would you leave your family behind for a chance to become someone new? The promise held for 32 years, from 1915 to 1947. But the man who signed it lasted only 18 years before he needed to be someone else. Loyalty has a price. Sometimes the price is yourself. The promise sits behind glass now, stripped of secrets, just paper with fading ink. But every person who reads it understands what it represents. Transformation costs more than money. It costs identity, family, past, and the ability to ever truly go home. That's not a success story. That's a sentence.